My guest on today's episode is Claire Bourdon, and for someone that doesn't like doing math, she has spent a long time doing math and analytics. But as we got talking through her career journey, we got to touch on things like imposter syndrome. And one of the really cool things that we got to see is that we're navigating things like imposter syndrome, but when Claire is taking these opportunities to try and help others, help teach them, that you can start to overcome this a little bit. You can start to understand better about yourself, the things you know, and really get fulfillment from helping others. And for Claire, that's led to being an educator with 100 devs. I think that you're really going to enjoy this podcast. I think that there's a lot to take away, especially for people that are transitioning into a software development role. So sit back, enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Claire, thanks for joining me. Do you want to kick us off with giving a little bit of background for career journey and getting started as early or late as you'd like on that?
Yeah, so I'm currently working as a data engineer at Purdue University, but I was not one of those people that wanted to be a coder from the time I was a baby or whatever.
Yeah.
I didn't even actually know that that was a career path that I could pursue until after I graduated college. Interestingly enough,
Okay.
yeah. So I grew up in a really rural area, and I just didn't have really the opportunities or anybody in my life who knew how to code or really knew much about that career. It wasn't something that was remotely taught in an elementary school, junior high, high school. It was not a thing. I learned how to type from a typewriter teacher.
Okay.
So this the barest minimum to know how to use a computer was basically the only thing that I learned. And like I said, I didn't really have any role models in my life that were, writing code or anything like that. And I think crucially, I didn't really have access to good internet until I really went to college. I always lived in really rural areas, growing up all the way up until I was 18. And we just had dial-up internet and the slowest, we had AOL. Up until I went to college. And
I can relate to that, by the way, because I
yeah,
definitely grew up in a rural area. I can remember trying to play video games at home and my family is sharing the internet. So if someone was like, I want to check my email, I would be like,
yep.
my video games.
Yeah, mom picks up the phone. You're like, no,
Yeah.
you lose everything. I had that happen a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I couldn't even, couldn't play YouTube videos. A lot of, I have so many friends who say, oh, I learned to code with MySpace, building up my MySpace profile or Neopets, right? Neopets was another big one. I learned, so many people learn HTML from Neopets.
My sister was like that. Yeah. She had her Neopets store and she was always customizing it with, yeah.
Yeah. No, we didn't even have the bandwidth that I could even open Neopets. Really, any site with images was questionable and would take a long time to load. And YouTube videos were out of the question. So, I could use the internet in only its most basic form, pretty much until I went to college. And so with that, I wasn't really exposed to the wider world of coding or development. I knew that that coding was a thing, but I thought that it required that really intensive study and, a bunch of degrees and you had to be super duper smart. And I also thought you had to be really good at math. And I know a lot of coders are. I am not. It never came really naturally to me. And so I just thought, well, I can't do that. I'm not smart enough to be a coder. I told myself that a lot growing up. I can't write code. I'm not smart enough. I like computers and I like all this stuff related to technology, but I'm not smart enough to code. So I went to college and completely contrasting what I just said, I went to college for statistics.
Okay. Yeah. No math involved in that though. Yeah.
Right. I know. So I was basically just throwing. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had really no future passion because my parents never had traditional office jobs. They're highly educated, but they just never worked a traditional office job. And I knew that's what I wanted to do, but I knew nothing about it because neither of my parents ever did.
Sure, yeah.
So I was just I have no idea what I want to do. Just throwing darts at a dartboard. Statistics, I could probably make money with statistics. I don't know, man. And so I went to school for statistics. Did not have a good time, as you might expect. I graduated. I made it, but that was about all I could say about that.
If you don't mind me asking though,
yeah.
so and you said, didn't have a good time. So when you picked that as a path, was the thought process, yeah, I can probably get a job with this, even though it was I don't, like you said, I don't really like math. So it was probably more around the job.
Yeah, it was really that. It was really a very sort of a cynical, I don't really feel like any, like, I really like English and literature and stuff, but I knew, you can't make money with that. Unfortunately, I wish you could. It's really, really difficult to make
Sure,
a
yeah.
career out of that. Like, I wanted to be a librarian, but, and I was just like, well, if I can't do what I really love, I guess I'll just pick something that'll make me some money. And I didn't
Okay.
feel good. And, so I didn't really put my heart into it, in college. And so I didn't really have that passion to study or to try to really do well. And so I struggled a lot. And I did try to take one coding class in college, actually. And it was a Java class. And I think from what I've learned since then, I feel like for many people, the college pedagogy of the way that programming is taught in college from a very theory heavy perspective, very abstract, very architecture of computers. Yes, those are wonderful things to know. But if you're like me and very like application minded, like I want to build stuff that's going to do something. Okay, what is this for? Why am I learning it? Why do I need this? It did not gel with me. I was like the dog at the chemistry set going, I have no idea what I'm doing just the entire time. And I really felt like, again, that was just reaffirmed that bias that I had that, hey, I'm not smart enough to code, right? Because I couldn't figure out this class. I couldn't, apply myself to this class and figure out what was really going on and understand what was happening. So it just kind of reaffirmed that bias that I had.
That's super interesting because when I reflect, like I went to university for computer engineering, and I think so little the sort of difference for me was like going into university, I was like, I know that I have to be writing code when I grow up, like I'm writing code. And so I had learned to program before university, but I can remember in school, we actually didn't have many programming courses. And the ones that we did were very much like you just described, where even as someone who was like, not that I was a good software developer, but I'm like, I've written code before. I understand high level how things work. And we would do these some of these programming courses, and I'm like, why are we doing this? Like, this is not appealing to me as someone who wants to write software. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, because I went into it kind of with an interest. Maybe I could do this. Maybe I could do this. And then by the time I finished that course, I was like, I can't. Like,
Right.
Okay, I tried it. I gave it a good try. Can't do it. Fine, I'll have to do something else.
And like you said, reconfirmed like this thought that you had around. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, it did. And like we had to take like our exams, like we had to write the code on paper, like.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Right. It's just like, why, yeah, it was super weird. And this was like before the age of AI and stuff. So there wasn't any excuse for, why we had to do it.
Sure,
I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, so graduated college, and I was extremely fortunate that I was able to land a job with an actuarial firm. A lot of statisticians are, become actuaries and such. And so I did work in that space for a while, at health insurance actuary. And just as the nature of that job, it's very analytical, and you use a lot of analytical tools. I think actuaries are probably some of the best people at building Excel dashboards in the world. Some of the stuff that, like, ostentatiously they're non-coders, but they build some of the craziest stuff in Excel. And I started just by osmosis. I started to just pick up some, a little bit of VBA programming, right? Because you got to, I got to fix this dashboard. What's this code doing? And then a little bit of SQL, because like you're hooking up this dashboard to an Oracle backend or whatever, and you got to figure out how to query for the data that you want. I distinctly remember the day when I first learned what cross joins were, because I accidentally cross joined two tables, and the DBA for our like department came over, and I thought she was going to murder me because I was bringing down the whole database. Yeah. So, I just started to pick some of this stuff up by, osmosis. And what was funny, though, is while I was learning this stuff, it didn't occur to me that this was coding. Right. It's just like, yeah, I'm just doing what I need to do to get my work done, right? I'm just, oh yeah, I'm learning this script and this script, but it's just skills, right? It's not coding. I'm not a coder. I don't have that piece of paper that says you are a coder, right? That you have a CS degree. And so I didn't believe that was what I was actually doing. And I did realize, though, that actuarial science was probably not the career path for me, just because you essentially have to take exams for years. You have to take a series of 7 exams, and they're intense. And it's just not, I was like, nah, I'm not doing that for the rest of my life.
No, I can already say not for me. Based on that alone, no.
Yeah, it's wild. Just the just a series of tests that you have to take, and it's intense study and preparation, and it just didn't appeal to me personally. So I decided to go into more just general analytics, and I actually got a job with an e-commerce company, did some like operational analytics for them, and I was lucky enough to kind of have one of those unicorn managers who's just extremely good, who's a manager, but they're also like a genius programmer, SQL genius, just incredible. And so just like sitting near him, I just picked stuff up, and over time he started to, delegate more work to me. I was writing more and more advanced SQL queries. And again, I didn't even realize what I was learning. I didn't think about it as learning to code or, learning programming. It was just like, oh yeah, I'm learning what I need to do to do my job.
Right.
And, I'm applying all this stuff immediately. And I started, working directly with devs on projects. I was like doing QA testing, then I'd meet with the devs every morning, and all these things that go into being a developer. I was doing a lot of them. I just didn't realize what I was doing. And so, I worked at that place for about 3 years, and then I moved back to my home state to be closer to family. Got a job with Purdue University, and that was another analytics job, but yet again, I found myself gravitating toward any technical project I could get my hands on. Anything that required, oh, we need you to write this Excel dashboard with VBA, VBA macros. I'd be like, oh yeah, I can do that. Let me write a macro for you. Doing VBA coding and anything that would get me closer to the technical side of things. I was on a big deployment for like a massive budget software rollout. It was all custom. I was working with consultants and all these things that developers do. I was just doing those. And then eventually there was an internal role that was posted within our company on one of the dev teams. It was for a senior developer role. And I was with a manager who I really admired. Like I liked this guy. I was like, man, I was talking to my coworkers, and I was like, man, I would love to work for that guy someday. And she was like, you should just apply for the job. And I'm like, ha ha ha, yeah, right. I literally laughed, and I was like, yeah, no way, absolutely. What are you talking about? I don't have a degree.
Like still talking yourself out of
yes, 100%.
I'm not okay.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It was this constant internal I'd come to this conclusion, and it was a safe conclusion, right? That you can't do this, right? That's a very safe feeling, because it means you don't have to try.
That's a really interesting way to put that. Yeah, it's like
you're safe in your little bubble, and you're doing things that you already know you're good at. You don't have to try to branch out into something that you don't know whether or not you'll be good at or whether or not you can do.
Yeah, that's I never really thought about it that way, but it's almost like it might not be the conclusion that is a happy conclusion, but also, as you said, it is safe, right? Because it means that you don't have to go outside of your comfort zone. You've already said, this is how it is. That's how it is. There's no extra pressure to go do something different about it. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, and our brains love being safe. They love being safe. They love, inertia. They love conserving energy and not, getting themselves worked up. So it's comfortable for our brains to just maintain that, right? But the fact that my coworker said you should apply, she said, you're always just working on technical stuff anyway. I mean, that's basically what you're doing already. And I was like, yeah, no way. But it planted a little seed, right? And that seed, as much as your brain tries to shut it down, that seed is going to grow. And eventually I was like, what do I got to lose? Honestly, what harm is it? I have a job already. I'm not going to lose my job if I apply this and don't get it.
No. And you're like, okay, I just keep doing what I was doing.
Yeah, because I didn't not like what I was doing. I actually really love analytics. I still do analytics for fun all the time. Like Excel is great. I freaking love Microsoft Excel.
If you don't mind me asking, then, so and this might be a little bit of a tangent from the career story, but you had started off by saying don't like math, right? Like that was one of the things at the beginning. So did you sort of discover for yourself along the way that there are parts to statistics and mathematics where you're like, I actually do enjoy parts of this, but there's other parts where you're like, still I'm not touching that because it's math and I don't like it? Or how did that evolve for you?
Yeah, so I think I love that question. It's a great question. So I think what I discovered is that I didn't necessarily like doing the math myself. I like figuring out how to make the computer do the math for me. which is, the entire purpose of Excel, right? Is you're figuring out how to construct these, these tools in a way that you don't got to do, I'm not scratching out equations by hand. That's terrible. I want to make the spreadsheet do my math for me. And so that was a huge impetus.
That. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, that was
cool.
a huge impetus for me to learn these things, to learn VBA, to learn advanced. That's been like the major driving force behind my whole arc is like, how can I not have to do math anymore?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's you still don't like math. I don't have to do it because the computer will do it for me.
Yeah, 100%. And so, I decided, okay, I'm going to apply for this role. And, as I thought back over the things I'd been doing, I found that I could actually put my resume together in such a way that, like, I don't have dev on my resume in the past, but gosh darn it, if I'm not doing a lot of things that look like it. And, the interview process went really well. I did a lot of prep. It's for anybody out there looking for a job, man. It is just as much about the cultural portion of it, about the, do they like you as a person as it is, about the technical skills. Cause I didn't fit the job description to a T. Absolutely not.
Right.
I was not entirely what they were looking for, but I was someone they could see themselves working with on their team. And so that really served me quite well. And then I got the job and it was really great. And I immediately started to panic because I was like, what did I do? Yeah. What did I just do? Like, I don't belong here. What the heck is this? Like, and my coworkers were lovely. They still are, everybody's lovely. Everybody was lovely and welcoming and wonderful. But I did not feel like I should be there. It was very much the imposter syndrome, which I think everybody encounters at multiple points throughout their life and their career. 100%. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to pause on that for two things. One was the imposter syndrome. So thank you for pausing on that because absolutely right. I mean, we could talk the entire time about imposter syndrome. And I think that I just wanted to pause on it because like the fact that when people find that they are going from one thing into another, that's going to be probably an amazing growth opportunity for them. It is very normal to have that feeling of like, wait a second, what did I just do? Or if you weren't necessarily taking a step consciously and you find yourself in a new spot and, maybe it's a manager that's tasked you with something, or you're at a startup and you find that you have to get something, whatever it happens to be, we find ourselves in these situations that are very likely going to end up being, tremendous growth opportunities for us. I don't know. Oftentimes I feel like we don't think about that in the moment. It's usually like, oh crap, like, what's happening right now? Like, this doesn't feel good. Am I even ready for this? So I thank you for calling that out because I think that's super important. The other thing that you had mentioned that I think is also a really good point for people. I know, from talking with a bunch of people, I'm sure you've had similar conversations. Like everyone who's looking for work right now is having a lot of challenges. And when I talk to people about, resumes, like how do I stand out? Like how do I be competitive? There are lots of people that have some not for everyone. Some people are very fresh out of school or they haven't actually worked before, and that's that's fine. But there are people that I've talked to where they have different work experience already, and a lot of them will say like, well, I'm trying to be a developer, so I don't have any dev experience, and they just kind of ignore like all of their other work experience. And I'm like, wait a second, there are so many things that might not be coding that if you could and even in your case, they weren't like practical like dev, or sorry, not practical is the wrong word, traditional like dev, right? But you were like, I can carve this out as related to dev. And even for people that don't have that, there's so many things that you could take from your work experience that would be very good to call out on a resume, like working in teams or like seeing projects like start to finish. Like there's so many good examples to call out like that I think people just sometimes ignore because they're like, well, that's not dev.
Yeah, 100%. And we'll get to this probably a little bit later, but one of the things I love to do in my work with 100 Devs, the nonprofit that I volunteer with, is sitting down with people, looking at their resume, and they always come to me and they're like, gosh, I just don't have anything. Like my resume is terrible. Like there's nothing on here that I can use. I can't be like, should I even talk about any of this? Should I just start a clean resume? It's like, you were leading a team of 100 to like do a charity drive for, some natural disaster or something at some big agency. And that's not no, that's amazing. Like, what are you talking about? I love helping people like like, pivot and see their resume in a whole new light about all the different things that are just as important as raw code knowledge that go into being a dev. The ability to talk to people is probably the most important one. So many people have that skill and are so good at it, but they just, or lead a team or whatever, any of that. It's just amazing to see people's eyes light up when they realize all the things on their resume that they're like, yeah, this is absolutely valid. Companies would love this about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, that's so funny. It seems to be, yeah.
Didn't want to interrupt you and steer things away, but I was like, I think these are some really good things that you mentioned that I wanted to pause on.
No, absolutely. I'm so glad you stopped on both of those. And also the imposter syndrome thing. That's why I specifically mention it, because everybody has felt it at some point. But it's a shameful feeling, right? It's a feeling that we don't like to admit often. And we feel like we're the only one who's felt that way, the only one who's felt inadequate in a new position or a role or an assignment or a project or a team. So it's so important to verbalize that and be like, yeah, I feel that way too. Everybody at every level has felt that way at some point.
Yeah.
And what's important is how you deal with it.
The more people that you hear talking about it, the more that it doesn't, I never think that it like just makes it go away, but I think more that you hear people saying, you're like, oh wait, like I'm not supposed to, like shame, the word that you use, like shame, I think is a good one, because we almost want to like hide it or not acknowledge it, or like, you don't want to tell people that you experience it. But the more that you like talk about it, and the more you realize people go through it, the more you're like, wait a second, like, sure, it's an uncomfortable feeling, but it feels better to know other people also experience it. Like you're not alone in that sense. So I love being able to be like, hey, when I switch into this role or this team, I'm like, yeah, the first little bit, I'm like, what the heck did I do? And like, what have I got myself into? But every single time it pans out and turns into something where I'm like, this is a really good like growth opportunity. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Like I say, what's important is just how you deal with it. You just feel it and you power through anyway and keep going. But yeah, yeah. I was definitely feeling it. It was really intense. I was like, why did they hire me? What the heck is going on? Even though they were wonderful. They were willing to teach me. They were training me. I was building myself up. I just couldn't see it at the time because I was still feeling, that just like the worst imposter who ever lived. And so as I was kind of panicking, I kind of started flailing around as you do. And I was like, I have to learn more. I have to learn more programming, more coding. I have to be better. And so I was, poking around online. I was looking at boot camps. I was looking at paid boot camps, like, teach me to be good, please. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with paid boot camps. A lot of people have done them. Many of them are wonderful. But in my case, I was very lucky to find 100 Devs, which is essentially a free training program. It was just serendipity, absolutely, because there was the founder, Leon Noel, made a post on Reddit, sort of just saying, hey, look, we're just starting these free classes on Twitch. If you want to learn web development, like, come join us. Everything's free. There's no obligation. You don't have to do anything. You just join our Discord, join our Twitch, and let's learn web dev. And this was in I'm probably going to get this wrong, 2022, when this was happening. I think it was like the tail end of 21, start of 22. I always get the years wrong, but
especially during that time, everything is the same year. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, time means nothing since 2020. I don't know, basically. So I was just lucky enough to see that post. I was like, hey, what do I got to lose? Again, it was that feeling of, I'm just going to do this. What do I have to lose? Right? What's the worst that could happen? Nothing. I just drop out, or I assumed I was going to hit a paywall. Like, I'll be like, okay, I'll do it for a couple months until I hit the paywall, and then I'll bounce, but it ended up lasting about a year. I learned full stack web development while still doing my, my very much back end job as a senior engineer, working on data warehousing with Purdue. And doing this course. And it was pretty transformative for me in a lot of ways, because it essentially showed me that for once, it forced me to dispel that notion that I wasn't smart enough to code. Because even though I was doing it at my day job, I still felt like I wasn't smart enough because I didn't believe it. It's like, why did they hire me? Right. Like, there was a mistake. They'll figure it out. But just going through this course and actually learning this stuff and realizing that I could not only learn it, I could articulate it to others, basically dispel that once and for all, and maybe see like, okay, wait, you're learning this, you're applying it, you're doing all the homeworks for, you're enjoying learning, which is not something I'd felt in a long time, after my experience in college. And it was like, okay, you're not only doing that, you're then turning around and you're starting to help others learn this material too. that's got to be worth something, right? And so from there, I got a lot more confident in my job. I started to, give more suggestions. I started to progress. I was able to, just be more confident in the abilities that I already had, and put forward those abilities to help my team at work. And then also developing in my role with 100 Devs after the course was completed. I kept helping people. I kept streaming. I started streaming on Twitch. I first started just helping people on Discord, here and there, onesie twosies. And eventually the Discord rooms would fill up and they'd be like, go to Twitch. And I'm like, what's Twitch? So I learned what that was. I started streaming, helping people just learn the basics of coding and really focusing on the thing that anybody can code. Like you don't need a degree, you don't need a piece of paper, anybody can do this. And so that's kind of where we are today. I create content. I really try to, I'm still a data engineer, but I still teach web development as well, just because I feel like web development is such a great all-rounder kind of skill. Anybody can really pick it up. You don't have to have any tools, or, you can build a website on your phone, right? You can do it anywhere. So it's a great skill to have. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we are today.
That's awesome. I think I'm curious to hear from you on the sort of this phase where you start helping others, right? Like,
Yeah.
I have often told people that, when, as you're learning things, when you get to a point where you start teaching other people, or you're like realizing like I'm helping someone, then did you have this feeling right away where you're like, wait a second, I actually, like, I know what I'm talking about? Or did you, like, I'm just curious what the reflection process was like, going from like, I don't know anything, or having so much imposter syndrome, to like, wait a second, like, it's actually like I'm actually helping other people do this. Like, what can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that that's like a really critical thing that when I talk to especially more junior people and they're trying to progress, like what that looks like for them.
Yeah. So, I wouldn't say that there was one particular moment, but I have always loved teaching. I used to teach piano a little bit, when I was in high school, to make a little extra money. And I don't know, I really like just seeing people get a concept when you see them suddenly just click and be like, oh, there it is, and it's like, yeah, you get it now. Isn't it awesome? That's so cool.
Yeah.
And that's just such a cool feeling for me to have. And I distinctly remember how I kind of started going down that path. I was on the Discord, 100 Devs Discord, and there was a person there who's in chat who was just despairing. They were just like, I don't understand this. Like, I'm going to quit. Like, if I can't do this homework, I'm just going to quit. And I remember I had the choice. I could go eat dinner, or I could spend a few minutes in a voice chat, like just helping this one person. I had that choice. And I remember just really being like, I'm really hungry. I'd love to go eat dinner, but I could help this person. And I chose to help this one person, and somebody else happened to join the call, just popped in voice chat, see what we were doing. And they were like, at the end of this, I'd helped this person. We solved all the problems. They were feeling much better. And the other person that joined, they were like, okay, so when are you going to do this again? And I'm like, what? I didn't know that this was a thing that I was doing now. And so I did it again. I set up a little schedule. I was like, maybe people would enjoy this. And like I said, it started to fill up, and people started to give me feedback that, this was helping them with these topics and understanding those topics. And I've always known that teaching is the best way to learn. I saw that as a piano teacher. And so with that, like I say, it really forced me to kind of confront that feeling of inadequacy that I had. And not to say that I knew everything. I was still going through the course with everyone else, but to say like, okay, this is something I can do, that I can apply myself to, and we'll see returns. And yeah, I still felt like sometimes I would be on a Discord call or on a stream and trying to explain a topic and literally have the topic click for myself as I was teaching it to others. I would just sort of start like just sort of reading out rote, or like going through the problem or whatever, and being like, I don't know what I'm doing. But then as you're talking about it, if you can break it down into its simplest common denominator that other people can understand, then sometimes that clicks for you. And so it also kind of taught me the value of sometimes you just got to wing it. Like sometimes it's just a YOLO moment, and you're just like, look, we're just gonna try this out. We're just gonna jump in. It's okay. It might not be perfect. That was something as a kid I struggled with a lot, was feeling like I had to do it right. Like I had one try and I had to do it right. That perfect. I had to be perfect the first try. And so it kind of taught me the value of being a little bit messy, of just sometimes just jumping in without 100% knowledge and just trying and seeing what happens. And so that really helped me a lot, reframe myself and my abilities mentally.
Yeah, that that moment you describe where like you're helping someone and then you can literally see it. Well, depends. You can either hear it if it's voice or like you can see it. You experience it with them where they're like, "Oh man, I get it." That feeling is extremely rewarding. I don't know, like I'm sure people that are watching and listening, many people have experienced this at some point. Maybe it's not for software development, but for something where you've helped someone where they were like, "It just doesn't make sense. I'm never going to get it." You happen to get it to click for them, and just experiencing that is like, it's such a good feeling to be like, I was part of a part of helping you, get on the same page. It's really cool. But I really like what you were saying too around just kind of getting into things and just almost winging it, right? I manage engineering teams, and there's some things where I'm like, I feel like pretty confident. Like I do a lot of C# programming, so if I'm helping some basics in C#, I'm like, okay, like I've been doing this for years, like I got this, no problem. But there's other things where I'm like, hey, look, I will tell people on my team, I'm like, I don't know how that works. I don't have experience in that, but I'm like, if you need help, let's get on a call. And I've had to force myself to be more comfortable with like, you're not going to know everything, no, and people
Right.
don't expect you to, and that's cool. But like when you put two heads together, probably you can get further than just one person on their own. So I try to, like, as uncomfortable as it is, try to put myself into those situations. And often, like, I come out learning something, the person that I'm working with, like, ends up learning something, we get further on it, and it's not so bad. Like, it didn't have to be perfect, and it still works out.
Yeah, no, and yeah, that's I find that a lot when I'm talking to people again who are on the job hunt. They feel like they have to be 100% to even like go into the job hunt, be like, oh, but I don't know
Mm.
XYZ yet. And I'm like, do you have a resume? Like, can you build something basic? Like, then now's the time to start looking. Now's the time to start networking. You're never going to be
Yeah.
ready. There's no such thing. Ready does not exist. It's particularly in this industry where everything's always changing anyway, and you're never going to know anything about a particular topic. And if you are in a room and you are the person who knows the most in that room, you're in the wrong room. Go find another room where
Yeah.
people know more than you. Um,
Right back to the imposter syndrome, right? Go
yeah,
find the imposter syndrome room.
yeah, absolutely.
It's the right
And
room.
it's and that's why I love this field so much. It's so dynamic. Everybody's going to be able, everybody's going to have their little niche, their little area of expertise, and, go meet those people, go admit that you don't know stuff and learn from those people. And, yeah, there's no such thing as ready, I guess is my main takeaway there for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. And yeah, I think that kind of ties back into like you were saying earlier, this feeling of we like our brains want to find like something that's comfortable, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like we're trying to make sure that we have it all figured out. Like we have to build our comfort zone, but it's like no, like you're not going to be ready and like go. You just have to start, right? I have to keep moving and going forward on a path. So um I I wanted to hear more about, so a couple things, right? So I'm looking at the notes that you sent over, and so we started hearing about how you are teaching and helping people, and I think this is awesome, and for many reasons, right? One is like that you get to help people, obviously, and the other is like you were even saying it helps you learn and understand things. So um, I'm curious, like one of the things you wrote was learning to code as an adult versus learning in college. I think you've touched on it a little bit. So I think I have an idea about some of your perspective on this, but I wanted to hear a little bit more. So after going through college and seeing like how things go in terms of, if we were to generalize how a lot of topics are taught in college versus like what happens in real life outside of college, like what are your thoughts on like how people approach learning and like what's effective and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So I think, as an adult, we no longer have, we're out of the bubble, right? We no longer, the majority of us no longer
Sure.
have the luxury of theory, right? We're in it. We're living it now. Like this is no longer theory. This is application. We
Right.
are in the application. We're in the find out phase of our lives, however that manifests, right? Um, and so at that point, I think you really don't have the luxury of focusing on theory when trying to learn something as an adult for the most
Mm,
part. I think it has to come from like a perspective of application, right? Is all right, I'm going to teach you this thing and immediately turn around and tell you, here's why I'm teaching it to you and here's how you can apply it to do something right now. So a lot of the times when I'm teaching a concept, let's say APIs, right?
Yeah.
On my streams, it's going to be like, okay, I'm going to tell you about this API. We're going to build it together, and then I'm going to immediately help you build something where that API is going to be used, and it's going to have an application. It's going to be like a restaurant finder, or I had something that would, generate facts about dogs, and just something that's going to work. It doesn't have to be practical. It can be really silly and fun,
Sure.
but it's gonna need to do something. I'm not just going to explain here's what an API is, and here's all the parts of an API, and then okay, we're done. Class dismissed. It's like, all right, here's what an API is. Let's build it together, and then let's
Mm-hmm.
make it run. And you can make it run right now, and you can make it do something. And you can go home and tweak it and build something that's more relevant to you and put it in your portfolio, right? It has a purpose. It has an application. And so I think that for me, learning as an adult, one of the most beneficial things that I got from 100 Devs was all that immediate application, right? You have to learn a little bit of theory to learn why things work the way they do and that kind of thing. But immediately you're turning around and you're doing something with that's going to benefit you directly. And that's a huge motivation to learning, especially as an adult, when you understand more how the world works and that you got to get ahead somehow.
Yeah.
And so just that the practicality of all that material. And so that's what I try to really embody in my content as well, is like, all right, I'm going to teach you this thing, and here's what you can do with it.
That makes a lot of sense. I can, again, as you're talking through this, I'm thinking back to some of the things like when I was in school and those scenarios where I'm like why are we doing this, right? Like there'd be things we'd be getting taught and I'm like, part of me is like, I don't know why we're spending time on this. Part of me is like, I don't want to learn this. A lot of pretty typical like feelings for things like that in school. And I think one of the biggest problems though was that we would be bombarded by concepts and then it
Right.
would be like, so what, right?
Yeah.
And the
Why should I
so
care?
what,
Yeah.
yeah, the so what that we're getting is kind of like, well, you need to understand this, and it's like it's really hard to be motivated by concept after concept, and the only reason is like you're gonna need it later, and it's like okay, like I don't know, let me just remember it for later, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think as you're explaining this, like something that would have been so helpful is that if we just would have had more practical application, and to your point, doesn't have to be like you said it could be silly or whatever. As
Yeah.
long as you can see it being used and you can go, oh, like that's what we're actually talking about. That's a building block because so many of these things were just like, here's a concept and like here's the homework and you're like even the homework would be so artificial that you're like I don't understand how this is ever going to be applicable. And
Yeah.
like that way of learning to me just feel, and maybe for some people that works effectively, but
Oh,
I
sure.
don't
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know many people that are like, yeah, I really learned that way. And I think most people that I've talked to, at least in the software development space, it's very much the way you're describing, where it's like you know, light on the concept, and the more that we can get hands on trying something out, the more people are like, oh, I see like how this is coming together. So yeah, I think that really resonates with me.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that any of the theory stuff is bad either.
Sure.
Absolutely not. All that is important, and we need to know why things are the way we are. And we need to know the history of these languages and like why they work the way they do. And all that stuff. It's so important, but it needs to be blended and balanced with enough practical applications so that students feel motivated to learn because they know what all of this is for, like why it matters to them, why it's going to be important for their future, why it's going to be important to their present, because they can build stuff with it right now. You can go out and build a website. That's so cool.
Right.
All that stuff. That's the motivating factor. So yeah, I just
Yeah.
want to be clear about that. None of that theory stuff is great. And a lot of the times I wish I knew more of that, now that I'm in it and I'm like, I have a real passion for it. I'm building my own stuff. I would love to go back and revisit more theory. And I'm working on doing that. Some of the stuff I missed from just not having that formality of the college experience in that field. But yeah, it's got to be balanced. You got to balance it out.
It's funny you say that because one of the things that comes up even at the Commit Your Code conference, I was talking to some people about this, and I was literally talking with a group of people and had said like, people sometimes come up and they're like, hey, like what books would you recommend for like software development? I'm like, honestly, like it's not that I can't read, but I don't read books on software development to learn
Yeah.
software development. Talk to one group about this, explain why, and then the next group of people I talked to, someone was like, hey, what books would you recommend? And I'm like, but the interesting thing is I've been programming for a couple of decades now, and I think that at this point I think I actually would get some benefit around a little bit more theory. And it's because I'm not saying I'm not the best programmer in the world, but I have some experience where I've seen some things come together, and I think that I could actually jump into some more theoretical things, some higher level concepts, and being like, I have enough of my own experience where I could say, oh, I see how this would line up here. Whereas before, when that was at the beginning, I don't think any of the theory stuff just stuck because it was like, I just don't see how I piece this together in sort of this knowledge base that I'm trying to start with. It just didn't really work. But now maybe it would.
Yeah, and that's another kind of. I'm glad to hear you say that. So even you haven't gone through those classes. You're just like the theory. It just like went whoosh. Just straight out because yeah, you had nothing to attach it to. It had no anchor point. And I think
Yeah.
that's another thing that going back to the learning concepts thing. You got to have some kind of an anchor point to attach all this stuff to. Some reason, because the way our brains work is, like I said, they like to be efficient, right? They like to conserve energy. They like to conserve momentum. And so if your brain doesn't have to keep a permanent attachment between two neurons, it's not gonna, right? If you don't give it a reason to retain this information, it's just gonna be like, all right, I can get rid of that.
Yeah. What do we
Yeah.
use
And
this
so
for? Don't know. Okay, bye.
yeah, or you just remember it just long enough for the exam, right? And you
Yeah.
pass the exam, you're like, okay, we're done. Bye. Don't need this anymore. And so you got to give it that anchor point, that reason to be retained. And so but I do appreciate you say that. Makes me feel a little better. It's like, okay, yeah, this person went through the CS degree anyway, and yeah,
No, I had internships, and I remember going through school and being like so I had 5 years of school, but it was like school semester internship. So I had 6 internships, which were
wow,
amazing. But I can remember school semester, I would be like, why am I doing this? And then I would do an
yeah,
internship, and I'm like, oh, this is exactly
that's
why.
why, yeah,
Back to school, and I'm like, why am I doing this? And I
yeah,
just kept remembering being like, you get through this, you get to do the things that you were doing in your internships. That's the part that you like. That's the real life part. Like, stick around.
yeah.
And sure enough, that's how it worked. So I'm not saying that school was terrible or like I regret it. I certainly don't.
Yeah,
But I
no.
think that the way that the concepts were taught just literally did not align well with how my brain wants to retain information. So
Yeah, and I think fortunately I do think things have gotten a lot better in the teaching space. There's a lot more applied programs
mm,
and hands-on programs and learn on the job type programs nowadays, I think, than there were at least when I was going through school. A lot of the less, traditional sit in a lecture and just listen, take notes on paper, and a lot more
yeah.
okay, hands-on, go build stuff, go partner with a company, that kind of thing, building real projects, which I think is great. But I always do wonder about how many, really excellent coders had their careers, cut short in college just because they just didn't feel like they could connect with the material in the way that it was presented. So, now creating content online, and the reason I still volunteer with 100 Devs years later is just to hopefully help other people, maybe either rediscover that passion for actually
Mhm.
building stuff, and or discover it maybe a little sooner than I did, in an environment where they don't have to give anything but their time.
Right.
So there's no obligation to them but their time, and just help them discover that passion for just building cool stuff.
Well, and that I was again glancing at notes, and I wanted to segue over to this because I'm curious, right? Like I know,
Yeah.
people that work in tech. It's like, yeah, we got busy lives. Everyone's got busy lives, and so it's really cool that you're finding the opportunity to create content to help other people learn. Like, what does that look like for you in terms of balancing time, in terms of like being motivated or engaged to do it? Is it something where you wake up every day and you're like, hell yeah, I'm doing this? Is it something that comes kind of in waves? Like, what does that look like for you to be able to balance that in part of your life?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I love that. And to be completely transparent here, I have not streamed for several months now, just because
Mm,
my summer has been extremely busy, and I feel like you got to maintain your mental health. And for me, I'm doing a lot of traveling. I've also become a Pilates instructor, so I'm getting my teaching outlet in
cool.
a slightly different way. So I teach fitness classes as well, and so
That's
that of
awesome.
course takes up a lot of time. And so I'm down to basically one day a week now, where I have a day to myself to kind of recharge a little bit. And that day used to be my streaming day, which was Sunday. And so it's like, okay, I got to kind of reshuffle things here a little bit and figure out. I would love to make, streaming work again, but also also have to be very careful, because I've known so many content creators who have gotten burned out just trying to maintain a schedule that was not feasible for them as their life changes underneath them. But I will say, when I was streaming, the way that I maintained it was, and this is not a blueprint for everyone to follow, but I do a lot of prep for my streams. So I like to have all my ducks in a row before I ever go live. I know there's a lot of folks, amazing folks, who go online and just live code, just YOLO the entire time, who knows what's going to happen type of vibe. That's not really how I roll. I usually, if I'm going to build a project on stream, I have the entire thing prepped the day beforehand. It's all built already. It's on GitHub. And I have, worked out the kinks. I'm aware of any errors that might exist. We can address them on stream. I have notes, like I have a second monitor and got all, everything's pulled up. And then I go on stream and we run through it from scratch, but it's already built. It's done. And so, for me, that was kind of how it took a lot of the anxiety of streaming away, to just be like, yep, it's all done. You did it already. And it gave me the motivation to really like dig into these topics. Like, you say, teaching is the way to learn, right? It's like, okay, I got to talk about this topic. I gotta know it up and down, because I am going to be getting questions from chat, and who knows what those are going to be, right? I have no control over what chat's going to ask me about a particular topic. I can just do my best to present the material that I have, and then go from there and try to address any questions that chat has. So for me, it's just being mindful of, the amount of time that I'm spending on any particular thing, really doing prep work ahead of time to make sure that I'm as comfortable as I can be on stream, because a lot of my streams are 3 hours or more. And so, if I'm talking about a topic, I'm building, if I'm building like a full stack app from scratch, we're building front end, API database, that takes a long time. If you're trying to build something that is substantial in any way, it's not just a skeleton, right? You can build a skeleton, but that's no fun, right? It's gotta be something that's going to engage. You gotta play to the audience a little bit too, right? To get any eyes on Twitch, you got to build something that is visually interesting, or have something that is going to draw people in. And so that's another aspect of it too, right? So yeah, a lot of my streams are pretty long. I'm talking the entire time, so got to be mindful of my voice. Got to be mindful of that I'm eating and drinking, and taking breaks to use the restroom. Yeah. All those things are factors when you're trying to stay healthy and streaming for the long term. But prior to my break this summer, I had been streaming at least once a week. During the 100 Devs live cohort, I was streaming twice a week. I was streaming at least once a week for pretty much 3 years. I would say, yeah, two and a half. Yeah, 2.5 years ish. I've a few hundred streams in my archive on my YouTube channel, and and the consistency was really important too. Just knowing that, like, hey, Sunday stream day, find a topic, learn something cool, teach it to the audience. So the consistency is a big deal too, which is, I just need to find, now I'm working to find that new consistency with my, my fitness instructor, job now, and the extra demands on my time. I'm working on finding that new consistency for my schedule so I can get back to streaming, because I do love it. It's so much fun to do.
It's a really interesting point, right? The consistency for content creation is incredibly important, but I think that when sometimes people talk about this, like I really appreciate that you kind of touched on a couple different aspects of it. One is that, yeah, like, for you, it was Sundays are streaming day. Cool. So you try to, as much as you can, like, you dedicate that time towards it. But you also mentioned that, like, this is something that takes place over a long period of time. It's not you did this on one Sunday. This was over a long period of time, and life changes, right? So you may have, different, work might change, you might have different interests. Like, there's so many things that change in our lives that are outside of like content creation or things that we're just trying to do to help others. And so when I think about consistency, not only is it like, hey, try to find like a repeatable time that you can dedicate towards this, but it also needs to be like sustainable. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people miss, is that they try to make things very repeatable, or like, I'm going to keep doing it. And then they burn out, or like it suddenly doesn't fit anymore. And then they go, well, I guess that's it. And then it all
I'm
ends.
done forever.
And
yeah. Yes.
And then, yeah, like they end up missing out on what I would say is the most important part about consistency, which is like the sustainability part of it. So it's cool. Like you're finding, for you, you have a different outlet right now where you're able to teach, and that is not currently, it's not the streaming part, but you're also looking to find a way to kind of bring that back in, to get back to it because you enjoy that. But that just comes back to the sustainability part, right? You said this is a different, right now, a different phase of life, and cool. How do I bring that part back so that I can continue it? Which I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you mentioned about people, kind of flaming out, it's that happens a lot in the online learning space that I've seen, especially as adults, because a lot of times adults, and sometimes people pick up something for fun, like but a lot of the times there is a real driver behind it, like a circumstance in life change. Maybe they're having a kid and they need to realize they need to
Sure.
change careers, they need benefits. There's financial reasons, there's family reasons, all these things. Usually there's a real life impetus behind this desire to want to learn something like coding, right, or like programming as an adult, if it's not something they pursued when they were younger. And so they feel this sense of urgency. There's this sense of like, I have to do this, I have to get it done, and I have to do it as quickly as possible, and that's going to make my life better. And so I have to do it fast, because that's, the quicker I do this, the quicker my life's going to get better, right? And so they dive into it. They're going to be like, I'm going to do this every day for 5 hours, and that just happens so often. And it's like, no, you have to pace it out. It's the same with fitness too. Honestly, I have people that come into my fitness classes and they're like, okay, I have to get fit, for, I don't know, my wedding or whatever, so I'm going to come every day. It's like, no, you're going to end up injured. It's just,
I got 3 weeks. I got to turn my entire life around, and it's like,
yeah, I'm going to come twice a day, every day. Yeah. And then, you're going to, so it's the same principle, right? You can injure your body from overuse. You can also injure your mind and your spirit, for lack of a better word, from just doing too much. You have to be kind to yourself, whether that's in content creation or in content consumption, in the learning side of it. An overworked brain is not a happy brain. And so, you just have to be so careful about that. And no matter what the impetus is of why you're doing it, you have to pace yourself so you can finish the marathon and actually make it to the finish line.
Yeah, I really like that. It's pretty rare, but I've had a couple of people that I've talked to where, whether it's a career change or they're trying to switch teams or like move to like front end to back end, kind of like their focus area. And I've had only a couple of people that are like, hey, want your thoughts on this. But the way that they kind of lay it out to me is like they're talking about a time horizon that's like, potentially like 12 to 24 months. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, thank you so much for thinking about this on a time scale that like lets you actually make notable changes. Like they're probably factoring in for themselves, like, life has to continue. There's I
Right.
need to dedicate time towards this, but it's not going to be every waking moment. Like it just seems a lot more sustainable. And I realize that that's challenging for people because, like you said, if people are doing this out of this feeling of like this is going to make life better, there's a drive for it. The sooner that I can make that happen, the sooner things are better. Like that really resonates with me, and I think that I see that in a lot of people, and I feel like that's kind of like a normal human reaction. But it, expecting like dramatic change rapidly is just like we want it, and it's just not really realistic, and it's kind of like a recipe for disappointment and unfortunately for generally giving up on things or failing at them and then trying to like revisit them, and they're like, okay, I have to try again, and it's like it's my seventh attempt at trying to do this. And it's like if you could find a sustainable way to kind of bridge that, it probably would take less time, even though on the onset it seems like it would take much longer. But
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And that just reminds me of all the craft projects I've tried over the years where it's like, oh, I'm not good at this immediately. And it just goes, you just give up, right? And that's on a small scale. But, you see that a lot in this field too. When people are first starting out because they feel like they don't understand anything or, and they're just like, well, I guess I'm not cut out for this or whatever. It's like, no, if you could, anybody can do this. I promise you, anybody in any situation, there's no, like the excuse can't be like, oh, I don't have a good enough, computer or whatever. There's people learning to do this on their phone, or on a computer that's like a potato. I mean, it's just, anybody can do this. There's so much flexibility, especially with the internet the way it is now. The resources are all out there. But I think also too, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people tend to make when they're trying to be self-taught is not finding themselves, not giving themselves the grace of finding a community and a framework to rely on. Not finding outside support to help them and just saying, I'm going to be motivated. I'm going to motivate myself, and I'm going to do all this on my own without finding some kind of outside support system to rely on. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that probably resonates for I think that would be very applicable for most people. And I'm trying to think about this in a more general sense. And I know, for me, there are certain things where if I wanted to go learn them or invest time into them, I am actually not this is going to sound kind of weird. I'm not like a community learner,
Sure.
I'm not motivated by that personally. The example that comes to mind, this is not related to software development, but you were saying that you're, doing fitness instruction. And so CrossFit is something that comes to mind for me. So I historically was really into bodybuilding for years and years, and my wife does CrossFit. I sort of retired from the bodybuilding world, and I said to my wife, I'm going to do CrossFit with you. And the big difference is CrossFit is very much like it's a class. We go, everyone, it's a class, everyone's doing the workout together. And that actually, it sounds kind of funny. I'm still doing it, but I'm I actually don't like that part about CrossFit, which sounds kind of counter to the CrossFit culture, but I don't like it because I look at that as something where I want that to be me time. And I think that there are some things where I am personally motivated. I want this to be a thing that I do. However, I 100% agree that there are many people that, to your point, it's if that motivation's not there every day, and guess what? It's not going to be there every day. If you're unable to have a day where you're not motivated and you're I guess that's it. If that's going to be the thing that deters you from showing up and stops you from progressing, and then you ultimately give up, then I would say absolutely try to find some type of community, something where you can get a little bit of that external motivation coming in. The reason I shared sort of the counter example was just because I think that different people will find motivation in different ways. And the example that I was giving is because for me, that is an internal motivation, but that's I've been going to the gym surprisingly as long as I've been programming. So that's always been something that I've had for me, but not everyone will have that. And I think that, some people might say, I don't want a community because I don't want to be tied to someone else's schedule, which is fine. But there's going to be people that are if they don't even think about that as an option, then they may find themselves I'm going to give up, or I don't even know how to get started. But if they have that community around them to boost them, I see other people in the CrossFit example, I see other people showing up, and I can guarantee you if there wasn't a community, they wouldn't be there because they need that to thrive. And I think that's great.
Yeah, I think learning as an adult, we tend to there's no structure to it, right? Nobody's asking us to go to class every day. Nobody's telling us, okay, today you're going to learn this. So much of it is self-driven in so many ways. And it puts a lot of mental pressure on ourselves because we're dealing with everything else in our lives too. You have to do all the things that are required for living and make car payments and, clean your house and wash dishes and whatever. You have to just exist as an adult in a first world country. And then all of a sudden you're just, then you have to do all this additional mental load as well of learning. And so sometimes it's nice to have the option to offload some of that onto either, a community that's going to kind of help keep you on track, or people that can help answer questions for you, people you can reach out to just be hey, I'm just not understanding this and I've spent 3 hours on it. Can you just help me with this, stuff like that. And I think that, like you said, some people don't thrive in that environment. Some people feel I don't want anybody telling me what I'm learning next. I'm going to do this. This is entirely self-driven. I'm extremely passionate about this. Don't get in my way. And that's totally fine too. But I feel everybody should at least have a community they can fall back on, even if it's not something they spend a lot of time in either.
Yep, and even in the example I gave, I think that that's significantly less common. Like I think that the overwhelming, I don't have stats or data to prove this, but I think there's an overwhelming number of people that would benefit from having something like a community that they can rely on. At least based on my experience talking to people in the software space trying to learn, get started, I would 100% agree with that.
Yeah, and I mean, just me, like speaking from my personal experience, I'm a very like independent person. I guess I do a lot of things just myself. Like I'm very self-driven. I travel solo everywhere around the world, and I do all these things just me, like on my own schedule, my own time. I just prefer it that way. But man, when it comes to learning something new, I need something to keep me on track, because my brain is going to self-sabotage if it can. It's going to be like, nah, I want to save some energy here. We're not going to learn this today. And maybe it'd be easier if we just never tried again. Maybe it wasn't worth it, right? Maybe we should just stay in our little safe spot and not, learn anything new today. And that'll just save some energy,
I think that's like it's a really good reflection, and probably, I don't know, I feel like we're not taught this kind of thing ever,
No.
but like this ability to kind of like look internally and like, I don't know, like the person who's going to understand ourselves best is ourselves, right? So if you don't practice doing this reflection to be like, hey, like what is, how do I learn effectively, or like what gets me motivated, or if you never take the time to do this reflection, you just make assumptions about yourself and your life by looking at other people and like, well, other people say if you wake up at 5 a.m. and you make your bed and you get into the ice bath, then like all of a sudden you will just be a better human. And it's like,
right. Maybe
not. Maybe that's not what you need. But we often don't do this reflection for ourselves to be like, hey, like, would I benefit from this? Am I self-sabotaging? Do I have a tendency to do this? Like, we don't do that kind of reflection, and we really should.
Yeah, and I find that, and maybe this is just me, but I find that a lot of the rhetoric around self improvement as an adult, and being a better human and learning stuff, a lot of it is about all this stuff that you shouldn't be doing versus people telling you what you shouldn't do or what you're doing wrong, versus somebody telling you, let me help you with that. Like, let me support you and help you improve, versus telling you all the things that you've done wrong and basically saying, be better. So.
Yeah. Did you ever consider just being better? Like, I don't know.
Did you ever just enumerate all the things you're bad at and like all the things you're not doing correctly? And it's a lot of that seems to be
being a better person. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Versus like, hey, like here's this community, like come join us. We're all learning together. We all make mistakes. Let's just all support each other, and a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So I just find that that's so important. And in the age of the internet now, the way it exists, we have all these wonderful community spaces, all these virtual third spaces as the concept. A lot of us don't have you heard the concept of the third space?
I have not, no.
Yeah, so that's it's a concept, I guess, in philosophy where, and it used to be a lot more common before the modern age of everybody being so disconnected from each other and so separated physically by distance. There would just be places where people could gather in public, and just not for any reason, not to buy something or to view something or to necessarily even have an experience together, but just to come and be with each other,
Is
just
this the idea? And sorry, I think I actually have heard this. The third space being like not work, not home,
correct,
but like it is a third space.
The intermediate space. Yeah. So many of us now just go to work and we go home. And so you're spending time with just the same units of people all the time. And so you're not getting any new exposure, you're not getting any new stimulation or any new momentum towards maybe making a shift or learning something new or getting an interest or finding a new something new to feel creative about, or to share something with others. And so physical third spaces used to be really common, and people could just go there and hang out in the town square, or in a park on a bench, or just watching people play chess or whatever. But fortunately, I do feel like we're in the age of the online third space now. Whether that's as healthy as a physical third space, I don't know, but it's what we have, right? And so places like Discord or Twitch or those places are so valuable if you can find a space that welcomes you and will support you, that's a great alternative to the physical third space. And it can be a real motivator in keeping you engaged mentally in the things outside of work and home and family and all the drudgery of modern life that to help us be something more and be something better.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I like that. Yeah, I think it's funny you mentioned the third space thing, because when you said it, I was like, no, I don't know what that is. But I'm like, I actually think that I read third space like somewhere this week in like probably, I don't know, like a Google News like thing on my phone when I was scrolling. I thought that I saw third space. That's why I was like, wait a second, I think that is the thing between work and home. But yeah, I think you make a really good point that like if we have these online communities, these places we can be, even if it's not physically, that we have this opportunity to interact with others that, yeah, like it's outside of these groups of people that we otherwise spend all of our time with, right? Like, not that I'm complaining about who I spend my time with, but
No,
you
yeah.
have more these other I don't even say like, more or better opportunities. You have other opportunities for different things to be exposed to, which I think is very helpful.
Yeah, and I think one of the main difficulties in finding a good online third space is sometimes that so many online spaces require like some sort of monetary commitment to even enter them, right?
Right.
And so that's one thing that like I say, there's nothing wrong with people who've done a boot camp and paid boot camp, but so many of those have a financial barrier to entry, right? And so people who can't meet the barrier can't go in. And in my opinion, if you're trying to learn something new or find a community, like your time has value. It can't be equated to money, but your time is valuable. The time you're choosing to spend on this thing has value. So, that is worth something. So one thing I really appreciate about 100 Devs is they don't make you pay money on top of the time you are already paying to be in this space, in this community. And I think that's part of what makes it a true third space, is that anyone can join it. And so, there's no barrier to being a part of that community.
Right. Well, no, Claire, that makes a lot of sense. And I wanted to ask you sort of like maybe a final thought from you. And I know
Yeah.
you said you will be getting back into streaming and stuff, but maybe for folks that are listening and watching, where, like, from your perspective, where would be great spots for them if they're like for third space sort of opportunities? Like, what would be sort of top of mind for you to suggest to them? And then when you are kind of getting back into doing more streaming and stuff, where could people find you to learn from you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are some really great sort of coding communities out there, and I think I was at the Commit Your Code conference last week, and saw kind of the benefits of that online community there. So obviously I'm going to plug 100 Devs. It's 100devs.org. You can join our Discord. Like I say, no barrier to entry. There's no commitment, nothing like that. You can join, try it out. If you don't like it, that's fine. If you do like it, come hang out with us and learn to code or learn something new or help others. It's your choice how you wish to participate. And I would also recommend Free Code Camp. They're an awesome, great resource. You can learn really just any aspect of coding that you'd like to pursue. Again, there's they're launching new tracks all the time. I heard they're doing something with language here pretty soon, like learning like there's launching a language track. That's wild. I haven't confirmed that. Don't quote me on that, but I did hear about that. And then there's also I'm not going to get this right. So the Commit Your Code community does have a Discord. I'm not quite sure how to access that off the top of my head, but they do have their own Discord. If you go to their website, I'm sure you can find information on how to join that community. They also have a learning cohort, supportive community, and again, no barrier to entry there either. And also, too, I do want to encourage people to also, you can start your own space as well, using the tools that we already have, using Discord, using Twitch. I always recommend people to try out Twitch streaming. Like, there's nothing... Again, there's no barrier to entry there either. When I first started streaming, I had a busted laptop. I had no camera. I had no mic. My microphone was the little cruddy one that, comes with the laptop. I had that. I didn't have a second monitor. I had a little 14-inch laptop screen, and that was it. I had to coordinate everything on my one little screen, no camera. And I would occasionally, while I was streaming, I would have to mute myself, turn the laptop over, and smack it because the fan would stop working. So, there's no, like, people stream on their phones. I mean, you can do that. You can create your own community in a space like Twitch, and even there, nobody's probably going to watch you at first, and you're probably not going to have any eyes on you at all. And that's fine. You can start just teaching to an empty room, and maybe you'll start to build a community around that if your content is good, if you're creating a warm and welcoming space. And what's the worst that can happen, right? You're going to be rehearsing topics that you're trying to learn, or you're going to be building cool stuff. And at the end of it, maybe you don't have any viewers, but you have something cool, and maybe you've learned a new topic, and you've learned how to talk about it. You've learned how to present to a room, to a space. And so really, it's just a net positive. So I also encourage people to try starting your own, creating your own community, creating your own space. And yeah, if you're interested in checking out my content, you can find me on YouTube at Mayanwolf Streams. So pretty much on all socials, my username is Mayanwolf, MAYANWOLFE. Sometimes you come up with a username when you're 13 and it follows you for the rest of your life. That's how it goes. But yeah, so that is my username on pretty much any social. You can find me on X, you can find me on Blue Sky, you can find me on Twitch, YouTube, under that name. So yeah, I'm always happy to connect with folks from 100 Devs, but also from anywhere in the community. Connect with me. If you want to collaborate, let's collab. Always happy to meet folks, especially folks who are in the teaching space or who are in the educational content creation space. I really love learning from them, bettering myself, bettering my content, and learning how to reach more people in a more effective way.
Yeah, and so thank you so much. I really love that last bit of advice too on, like, I will tell people the learn in public thing. You're even saying like teach in public, right? Like the advice you just gave around like, hey, maybe no one's showing up to your stream or whatever. Like literally you only have positive things that can happen from that. It doesn't matter if no one's showing up. We said this earlier in this recording, right? Like you trying to teach things to other people will teach you all of the things that you maybe don't know as well as you thought. And there's nothing wrong with that. Anyone who's trying this kind of stuff out for the first time, it's going to suck in the beginning. That's totally cool. No one's first time doing anything is good, and don't expect it to be. That's not the point. Just keep doing it. You will get better. You will learn so much about how to teach. You'll learn about the topics you're trying to teach. And, I would say the side effect that would be really cool is if, yeah, people do start showing up and learning from you. That's great. But there's so much that you can gain just from trying to do it. And I would highly recommend it. I wish for my content creation, I tried in 2013 and I gave up after a few months because I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I was like, no one's reading my blog. Like, oh, like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, I
And
mean that's one thing I always tell people is just like, if you're going to start streaming, don't do it for the viewers or the money. That's not a good way to get started in the space.
Beast or I don't know the streamers, but Mr. Beast on YouTube. But like, you're not going to be this person like
Right.
from trying to stream after a week or something. So don't expect it. That's fine. It's like that should not be the goal. It's not that that's impossible to happen, but like I would say don't go into it with that perspective. And
Yeah. Yeah. My goal with streaming or creating any kind of content is always just to put something out in the world that I hope will be beneficial to someone, and also hopefully beneficial to me as I'm putting that content together. And so yeah, you should never go into it just from the purely sort of like for example, I went to college because I thought I was going into a field that could make me money, right? And had a miserable time. I picked a field just because I thought, oh, I can make money with this, and it was the worst decision, right? It's the same thing with something like streaming or content creation. If you go into it just saying like, oh, I want all the fame and the money right out the gate, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Claire, thank you so much for this conversation. I think that there's a ton of really useful information. I'll get links and stuff. I'll put that into the description so people can check that out, especially for the commit your code stuff, because I know if Danny ever watches this, he's going to say, what do you mean you don't have the links for this stuff? I'll make sure I have them.
Yes, I have them somewhere. I just don't know them, top of mind. Yeah, absolutely.
They're not right here, but they're somewhere. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm in the Discord, Danny. It's okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks again, Claire.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.